Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by Austral Asset Management. Now it's Tuesday, the 7th of February, and we have Jessica Amir, market strategist at Saxo Capital Markets, who's our guest today. Jessica, good afternoon.
Hello, Brian.
Now, Jess, before we get your insights, let's take a look and see how markets across the region have been performing. But we start first with cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is at 22,875. It's up 0.01%. Ethereum is at the 1,631 mark, and that's up 0.4%. Looking across the regional equity markets, we start with the SGX out of Singapore. It's down 0.19%. Then we have Bursa Malaysia, which is down 0.68%. Shanghai is up 0.22%. The ASX All Ordinaries is down 0.49%. The Nikkei is down 0.12%. The Hang Seng is up 0.69%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is up 0.51%. Jess, give us your view on how markets have performed in the first half of the day.
Well, I think there's a lot happening in markets, and it's all about what we received last week. So last week we received a lot of economic news out of the US that essentially the Federal Reserve can keep hiking interest rates. So we do have the US dollar poking higher. So the US dollar is now up 3% off its lows, and this is pressuring commodity prices down. So that's why you're seeing this mixed performance today. But more broadly, commodities are also suffering a bit because commodities, of course, they're paid in US dollars, and that's why they're on the nose. But a lot of things are going to be happening in the US their next session because they've got the Jerome Powell, the Fed chair speaking, as well as several other Fed speakers who are going to step up to the plate. And they could potentially come out and go against the Fed's potentially what we're calling a dovish tilt that they made last week. And that would essentially potentially trigger a knee-jerk reaction in the USD. So we could see the USD moved to higher ground. And also, Brian, we could also see equities pair back as well, with investors likely to take profits if we do get some hawkish commentary.
Now, Jess, speaking of hawkish commentary, we've just had a rates decision out in Australia. Tell us about that and how that impacts investor sentiment.
So the RBA hiked rates pretty much in line with expectations today by 25 basis points or 0.25%, taking the interest rates in Australia to 3.35. But what they importantly laid out was several more months of hikes, and that's a quote, months of hikes. So this has triggered a bit of a buying frenzy, and this will likely underpin essentially price strengths in the financial part of the market in Australia, because typically financial institutions make more money when they're getting more bang for their buck on assets. But inversely, this really puts pressure on local tech. But the bottom line is that there's more proof in the pudding. The RBA needs to keep hiking rates because inflation in Australia, it is not coming down. And the RBA thinks that inflation will probably come down somehow later this year. But that being said, coal prices today made one of their biggest daily jumps since May last year. So we're going to have to get a lot more clear evidence going forward. The current and moving forward indicators are really giving off different signals to what the RBA is looking at. So this is something that we're concerned about. That essentially means the RBA could keep on saying that they see more rate hikes ahead.
Now, Jess, give us some insights into some other commodity movements because there is a lot happening in commodities right now.
Yeah, totally. So overnight in the US, so we heard, I guess, whispers that Biden's administration could be lumping a 200% tariff on aluminium from Russia. Now, globally, what does this mean? Well, we have got to think about what would happen if this supply was taken out of the market. Well, Russia only contributes 6% of aluminium global supply. So what did the aluminium price do? Well, pretty much nothing. It didn't react. But the aluminium price has been paring back from its high. The aluminum or aluminium price, however you want to say it, it's up 20% from its cycle low. But with that higher US dollar, it's coming down. As long as we've got the higher US dollar, that is probably going to keep pressuring commodities lower. But we really are a little bit concerned that we're thinking that investors are forgetting that the market will return to focusing on fundamentals as soon as that US dollar rolls over again. So we've got to remember we do have a lack of physical supply in the market in aluminium and other metal commodities. For example, high purity alumina, there isn't enough to keep up with demand over the next several years. So we're likely to see high prices for aluminium, which is very important when you consider 250 kilograms of aluminium are needed in an electric vehicle. So that's something to consider.
Gosh, that's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
250 kilograms. Now,
Yeah.
just on a different note, staying on commodities, but more on the corporate side, we hear news of a potential merger of the two largest gold companies in the world. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So if you cast your eyes back to, I guess, almost 25 years ago, Newmont actually used to own Newcrest Mining, but now they're two separate entities. Newmont is the biggest gold mining company in the world. They're listed in the US. And then you've got the second biggest globally listed gold producer, and they're in Australia. They're called Newcrest Mining. But yesterday, Newmont put a bid on the offer for $17 billion takeover of that ASX mining company. So the ASX mining company, it's not only listed on the ASX, but they're also listed in Canada, as well as other exchanges as well. And their shares are doing really well. But I think more importantly, this highlights the global trend that we're seeing, and that central banks have been increasing their positions to gold, and investors have too, Brian. And this is because we've got to remember throughout history, going back to the 1930s, every time the Federal Reserve paused rate hikes and then cut, we saw gold outperform equities. The last time the Federal Reserve paused rate hikes and then cut, gold rallied up 61% to a new high. So this really highlights, this merger and acquisition or takeover really highlights that we do think that investors will start to wake up to this global trend of gold setting new higher highs in the short term and indeed over the long term as well.
Now, Jess, as always, great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Now, we've been speaking to Jessica Amir, market strategist at Saxo Capital Markets on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by Austral Asset Management. I'm Brian Fernandez. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.